Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to meet everyone. As now introduced, I'm a fourth year, now becoming a fourth year, yikes, PhD student. I'm working with Dr. Martin Monti here and also under supervision of Dr. Hongjin Liu in our department. And I'm here to present my recent project that I titled Topology of Phenomenological Experience, Leveraging Large Language Models and Feature Similarity. I also sent a Google Drive link to a PDF version of this, and it has some links that will take you to interactive graphs that you can look at if you'd like. Yeah, and feel free to leave me any comments. I would really appreciate any kind of opinions or feedback on this. Alrighty. So our motivating question was, what are the dimensions and structure of qualia? And by qualia here, I mean like a broader sense, qualia or general conscious experience. I think we can all agree that the structure and organization of conscious experience must be clearly characterized first before we can systematically relate it to brain data, model computational mechanisms, and predict behavior. And we've seen some exciting recent works on characterizing these kinds of dimensions or phenomenological or psychological spaces in certain modalities like color or odor perception, emotions, or mental representation of objects. And we've also seen some studies that look at dimensions of altered states of consciousness, such as meditation or psychedelic experiences. But I think what is still a little bit missing and what we want to do ultimately is to investigate what the kind of underlying structure is of general conscious experience that encompasses all of these experiences across modalities like vision, audition, cognition, emotion, etc. So that was our motivation for this. And it seems like for the empirical studies that I just mentioned that characterize the phenomenological spaces, the method of choice to relate between stimuli was similarity judgments, either through direct pairwise judgments or odd one out among triplets. Seems like similarity is the most popular method to derive these spaces. But when we think about asking participants, or you can try doing this now too, to make a direct pairwise similarity judgment between experiences in different domains, it seems a little bit difficult to assess. So like how related or how similar are experiences of feeling profound and feeling drunk? How would you rate that on, say, a Likert scale, or how would you pick these two out of another triplet of experiences? And given that there are infinitely many conscious experiences, it seems also very costly to assess all of these combinations in human participants. So are we out of luck? Like, can we not use similarities at all? So it seems that even for entities that are not within a category or within a domain, so that two entities are very dissimilar across domains, there are still systematic assessments being made across participants. So in semantic concepts literature, they have tested this triad studies, like triad judgments for participants, where they would be given three entities that are not related much or weakly similar, and they would ask people to choose the most similar pair. And when people were asked to do this, there seemed to be pretty strong agreement across participants, almost as strong as when the similarity were within domain or highly similar. And when people were asked to explain why they were making this judgment, like why did they choose cup and teacher as opposed to teacher and hail, there was also strong agreement in their explanations. And that seemed to be mostly explained away by thematic or featural characteristics. So people would say, oh, I chose cup and teacher because they are both at school, or they can be both at school. Or they might say, this is from another example, but blouses and towels are more similar to each other because they are both made of fabric. So this is getting at the feature of the two entities. So In other studies, they have also shown that this kind of word association data, or like that includes these thematic features, situation features, or entity features, that kind of data can reliably predict similarity judgments, and it will outperform similarity judgments predicted by models that are based on word co-occurrence, like word2vec or GLOVE. Now,
yeah, just quickly. I can actually check it later in these papers, but can you tell us whether they how many objects or concepts they compared, and so whether the explanation afterwards was a free choice or free reports or some kind of choice among the selected multiples?
I believe I'm not sure if they had choices. But what they do, I'm pretty sure they were free response, and they coded the responses based on a previous paper that came up with these thematic feature taxonomic, and there were two other reasons, lexical and valence, so like negative or positive valence. And so they manually, I think, coded them and then counted how many there were.
And how many concepts did they test, roughly?
Oh, I don't have an answer right now, but I can check in later.
Later, that's fine. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So I want to focus on these semantic features and the power of semantic features. In the semantic concept research or semantic memory, semantic processing literature, semantic features have been used a lot to represent concepts and discover how they are categorized. So how it goes usually is they would ask the participants, what are the properties of a car, or what are the properties of a cat? And then the participants would either produce their features, like it's a vehicle, has wheels, it can move, or they would choose from a pre-existing set of norms that are coming from another like feature production norm study. And these answers are believed to represent at least like a temporary abstraction of this given concept, a car. And now with these features, we can easily create these feature vectors, binary feature vectors, where rows correspond to the entities that are being tested, and the columns correspond to the features that were generated across the study. And one means, yes, this being a vehicle is a feature that this participant said applies to this entity. It also has wheels, but the feature of being a mammal does not apply to this entity, so on and so forth. And we do this for all the concepts that are included in the stimuli set of the study, and we get a feature applicability matrix. And now with this information about what features are shared and what features are distinct to each concept, we can derive the relationship of these features to each other, and also look at category organization based on like family resemblance, and pooling across participants. So maybe there were 5 people that said being a vehicle applies to car, and 6 people that said having wheels applies to car, etc., etc. This will preserve the variability. So just having this feature-based account of a concept representation doesn't mean that it's definitive. So there's still variability preserved. And so now you can imagine that having this kind of feature applicability matrix will allow for an indirect quantification of similarity, because you can compute either the cosine similarity between the vectors or plot them on a Euclidean space and look at their proximity data. And and there have been studies that has shown that category membership or typicality and other external variables, and as well as similarity judgments, can be pretty reliably predicted with this data. So now we ask, so it seems like this is a pretty successful way of representing complex representations. So can we adopt the same paradigm to represent conscious experiences? Can we ask people to list features of a certain state and then use that to indirectly quantify similarity. So as you can imagine, creating these feature norms, like if we wanted to give participants a list of features to choose from, that is going to require hundreds of responses from participants first, and then a lot of manual curation by the researchers. And going back to our previous example, eliciting features of, say, I felt profound or I felt drunk can be pretty difficult or at least inefficient for a lot of participants unless they have gone through years of therapy or spend all day thinking about this like I do. So it sounds still pretty difficult to assess. But fortunately now we have a new computational tool at our disposal, large language models, which have been shown recently to approach human level performance in various cognitive tasks. This includes tasks like analogical reasoning or even perceptual similarity judgments. So one group directly asked GPT models to make similarity judgments for perceptual stimuli such as pitch or colors, and their responses were comparable to that of humans, and it even recovered well-known psychophysical representations like the color wheel and the pitch spiral. So this suggests that LLMs are capable of creating perceptual representations based on textual data. And indeed, recently also, another group asked GPT to generate features for objects, just like how humans were asked to generate features for objects. And there was no obvious difference between what was generated by GPT, other than GPT creating a lot more, but the types of answers were not that different, and it also led to good prediction of other variables. So this demonstrates that LLMs can be used as a very useful automatic tools to produce an arbitrary number of features for an arbitrary number of concepts, no matter how diverse they are, and we only need to pay them less than a cent for a response. So given these two lines of research now.
It's Zoe, about the last slide, again, sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
About this GPT-3 number 6 paper and the others, so far the presentation of the stimulus has been always a word, right?
Sorry, say that again?
The presentation or input to this LLM has been always a word.
Yeah, they're words.
So it's not like through the images or through the actual sound or things like that. I don't remember actually the Marjay paper, but they didn't actually present the stimulus in a rich actual sensory modality, right? Yes.
Yeah, no, not in the actual sensory modality. They might have, for colors, they might have given like the hex code.
Yes, we did that
or
as
like
well.
the pitch, like whatever hertz. Yeah.
Yeah, and that means that that also leads to another quick question about previous study done in human. Has they looked at whether the similarity or the rod response changes depending on the mode of the presentation? Like after seeing the actual car to check this feature versus looking at the word car to check the feature. That probably is different, right? I don't know whether somebody looked at that or not.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately. I think the Hebart group, when they ask for features of objects, they present pictures.
Yeah.
But in semantic literature, they present just the word. But I don't know if there were any studies that compared the responses across the two. That is very interesting, though.
Yeah, I think that's a gap in the literature, I think.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so given these two lines of literature that show relative success, we propose to prompt GPT models for phenomenological features of experiences, and then leverage the distribution of those features that were generated to discover the dimensions and explore the topology of the Qualia space that comes out of it. And in doing so, we adopted two more methodological choices, so-called topic modeling and network analysis, but I will get into this briefly when I explain the methods. Okay, so then another question is, what data set do we use? So we are working under the assumption that at least some representative conscious experiences that are commonly experienced across people are included as items on self-report retrospective questionnaires that purport to test phenomenological states. And so we did a literature review and found 28 relevant questionnaires, which resulted in about 1,000 items across 180 dimensions as defined by each instrument. And by this, I mean like positive affect, negative affect, mental agency, bodily feelings. And the items would look something like, my mind jumped a lot from one thing to another. I had difficulty making even the smallest decision. I felt threatened, etc., across many, many different modalities. And we edited them a little bit to be all in first person, past or present tense. And if you are interested, and if you're looking at the PDF, you can look at all the instruments and the items in the link. Right. So given all of these items, we're going to follow this general pipeline of prompting GPT for its features, and then because it creates a lot of answers, we have to pre-process them to collapse some synonyms and filter them. And we explored two different ways of calculating similarity, and I'll get into this in a bit. And then using the similarity measures calculated from this step, we built a network. We just chose graphical networks as a way to characterize the psychological space. And then using a sort of hierarchical clustering, we can identify some communities of items that are more similar to each other than others. So, is there a question? No, okay. So we prompted 3 of the GPT models that are out right now, 3, 3.5, and 4. So the instructions are some kind of like this. We say you will be given a description of a subjective experience. Imagine what this feels like and give a list of the most representative characteristics of how that feels like. It can be perceptual, emotional, physiological, or cognitive. And then we give them the item from the questionnaire data set. So I felt at peace, and GPT would say calm, content, and relaxed. So we collect all of that, but there are so many of them. There's more than 10,000 unique phrases that GPT will produce depending on the model. So we do a clustering on the embeddings of those phrases to find some synonymous features. And so I can also explain this in the latter half of the meeting, but we would collapse them into a synonym if the distance between the feature in the cluster is closer than a certain distance to the centroid of the cluster. Ariel?
Yeah, sorry, this might be a technical question for later, but I'm just wondering if you ran the question multiple times and if you changed the temperature when you were getting your outputs from it, just in terms of those parameters.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I ran them through 10 times, kind of to mimic human experiments. As for the temperature, I think I did 1, which was, I think it's from 0 to 2, right? So I just did in the middle. And then all the other ones, I believe, were defaults, maybe except for the number of max tokens, because we just wanted a smaller, concise answer.
Great, thanks.
Hey, Zoe, you just mentioned that to mimic human, does it mean that you also have the version of the data from actual human?
No, sorry, I meant to simulate human experiments, because you would ask more than 10 people the same thing. So kind of to simulate that, we ran the same procedure through GPT 10 times, but I don't have human data yet. That's what I'm hoping to do soon, and then we
So
can.
hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetical. Yeah.
Because I would imagine that if you ask me the same thing 10 times, I might actually say the same, 10 times. So
Yeah. No. Yeah. So it would be. So we wanted it to be like 10 different people, but there is some variability in GPT's response. There's not a lot. I'm not sure. I assume it might be more variable across people than GPT. Aniko?
Yes, thank you. Similar question to the previous ones. So have you done this with all the 3 versions of GPT? The
I
10,
did, yeah.
asking it 10 times. And then
Yeah.
were you doing it at the same time, or were you doing it different days or different weeks? Or like, I'm just wondering whether there has been an update between, like, would it be possible to have an update on the backend at ChatGPT when you were doing this?
I see. I don't think so. When I was running this, I ran all 10 trials at the same time. And I don't think there, as far as I know, there weren't any updates since then.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I'm
if you were, yeah, okay, thank you.
Chewy?
Yeah,
Did I say that
thank you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for introducing the methodology. I have a question about instruction. I wonder why you are using this for phenomena words: perceptual, emotional, physiological, and cognitive. I mean, are they enough to cover all the experiences, or you want some specific results from the language model or so?
That's a great question. I actually saw your comment on the PowerPoint. Sorry, I didn't get to that comment. But I think that's a great question. I don't really have a good theoretically grounded reason for choosing these 4. I think I just did that looking over the dimensions of the questionnaire items that we collected. It seemed like most of them were about perception, emotions, or bodily feelings, or cognitive. There were, of course, other ones and more fine-grained categories, but it would have been a bit too complicated. And I think I'm honestly not sure how much this affects the answers. If GPT is leaving out certain answers because they don't fall into perceptual, emotional, or whatever. But I think the one thing that I did want to avoid from GPT doing was referring to answers that are not about phenomenology. So for example, like my brain activity was XYZ, or like something was happening in the environment. Like those things I didn't really want in the answers. I wanted things strictly about subjective experience, and this was how I was trying to do it, but it's definitely not if you have better suggestions, I would love to hear them.
Okay, so it's your summary based on previous let's say data set or the list of questionnaires you showed on the previous slide, right? I can imagine this will make a difference for real human participants because you give them clear, say, which specific domain you want them to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For GPT, I'm not sure, but I can imagine for real humans, this will make an influence. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and for some questionnaires, I'll just say this and then move on. But for some questionnaires, like there's one called Phenomenology of Consciousness Inventory. And before they ask the participants to fill out the questionnaire by rating the Likert scales, they give them a sheet of definitions of what is perception, like what do we mean by perception, or what do we mean by sensation. And so I did consider giving GPT some examples or giving it more information like that. But we kept it 0 shot, like no examples for now, just because I didn't want to bias it and I didn't know what good answers would consist of anyway. So yeah,
Okay.
but that is something I was thinking of.
Can I follow up on that? Just because this is really important. There is a risk, because if you think of it, there's something like the catalog of conscious experiences by Chalmers, where he lists I forget, 12 possible types of conscious experiences. But there's a risk that if Zoe specified it too much, then we'd be really begging the answer, meaning we'd be really telling ChatGPT what we think the structure is, and we'd be imposing it. So sort of finding the right equilibrium, is there are problems on both ends of it, right? Being too vague or being too specific.
Yeah, exactly. I really didn't want to say anything at all, if I'm being honest. But it kept on blabbing about other things, so I kind of had to do it. Other question, and thanks for the great questions. Okay, moving on for now. Okay, so then after collapsing the synonymous features, we can get anything between 500 to 900 features or dimensions now. That goes into the feature applicability matrix, depending on the model that was generating the features and also the parameters of filtering and pre-processing. So after we get that feature applicability matrix, we can compute the similarity measures. So the first kind that I tried were the measures proposed by Tversky in his seminal paper, which he proposed as an alternative approach to metric or dimensional spaces based on feature matching. And it's essentially just a function of what common features and what distinctive features the two entities share. And I can just tell you right now that it didn't really go well. I think, so it didn't, after building the network and looking at the resulting communities, which I will get into in a bit, we couldn't really see a lot of interpretable communities as much as we did with the other method that I will talk about. And I think this is presumably due to the high dimensionality. So even after reducing synonyms and filtering, there are still way too many features, 500 to 900, compared to the number of items we have, which is 1,000. And many of those features probably mean the same thing still, or by themselves don't really hold a lot of information. So the matrix might be sparse and therefore might not be creating the interpretable clusters that we wanted. So some kind of smoothing or further dimensionality reduction I thought was needed, and to do so, we adopted topic modeling. Topic modeling gets used a lot in natural language processing. Maybe some of you are experts here, but essentially it is trying to extract the gist of a document or a set of words, and then it'll express a document as a probability distribution of a set of latent topics that is presumed to have generated the document, my bad. So each topic subsequently is also a probability distribution over some words or terms that occur in similar documents or occur together a lot. And there are many different algorithms that achieve this, such as latent Dirichlet location, but we decided to use non-negative matrix factorization just because we are already working with a non-negative matrix with the feature applicability matrix, and also NMF, I think, is known to result in more interpretable topics. Yeah. So doing that, we extracted 350 topics or themes of experience or experiential features from all the features that survived after the pre-processing step. So this is an example here of one topic that seems to be about heightened sensory sensitivity or perceptual sensitivity. You can also follow the link to go see all of the other ones too. And so doing this, now each item, which were the documents, can be expressed as a topic probability vector of 350 dimensions instead of 600 or 900. And this also allows for a single document to be expressed as consisting of multiple topics. So before, in the questionnaire items, one item like I felt threatened might have been classified into a latent dimension of anxiety, let's say. So we might have thought that that document, I felt threatened, only has a topic, anxiety, but now there's more fine-grained picture of that experience. So it could be anxiety, but also heightened sensory sensitivity, as well as like increased heartbeat, or like rushing thoughts. It could be many of these combinations of things. And because the probability distribution of each document is constrained to one, increase in the probability of one topic means another probability of another topic will decrease. So it's like a balance of all of those topics. And I think theoretically, it kind of makes sense as well if we are trying to assess like the multidimensionality of experience. But I think that's a bit of a tangent. Yeah, so using those similarity measures now.
Yeah, about the last method, is it possible to use this as a generative model for a new topic or sentence?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think
Have you tried to do that? Yeah.
I did not.
Okay.
I don't know too well about how to do it. But I do know that LDA, latent non-negative matrix factorization, I believe, is a dimension reduction or like a decomposition method. But I think LDA is a generative algorithm. So I have read somewhere that you can generate documents from the topics. Yeah, but I didn't try it.
It's I don't think it's your current interest, but it may be interesting to ask GPT or something to generate paragraph based on the kind of the topic, and then let them rate by either human or GPT, and then see if there is a real kind of conceptual cluster that can be generated from the core I don't know, concept or something like that. It's just a thought. Yeah. Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry, to jump briefly on Nao's comment. I've been thinking about like control measures throughout this. Like, are there ways you could test whether like GPT or any of the other models would like disagree if you like fed it the wrong sort of data? And like Nao's generative suggestion is sort of related to that theme. It's like currently what you're doing, which is fascinating, is like all these ways of like trying to map the space GPT already has based on like taking its word for granted. But it'd be really interesting to do the same thing, but like feed it stuff that's a little bit wrong or very wrong compared to humans, and see whether it would agree or disagree and to what extent. That was just a thought I wanted to share before I forgot.
So feed what? Feed wrong?
So yeah, so instead of like feeding it the prompts and asking it like how similar are these two different things, instead flip it around. Tell it like, these are these two different things. I think they're like this similar or this dissimilar or something to that effect. Do you agree or do you disagree with that? To sort of get its agreement with, like to see its accuracy at assessing other human participants, or its accuracy at like having a model of similarity space. It's just I could imagine a world in which you would get the dimensions that you do, and they might seem to make sense, but where it was also unstable, and if you tried suggesting to it a whole bunch of other sorts of weird ideas, it would still like give those reasonable credence, or maybe it wouldn't, or that sort of thing. Anyway, I haven't thought this through well enough yet, but I just remembered it. I thought of it based on Nao's comments about if you invert it and you try and get it to like generate, like you feed it two of your features and you ask it, like generate an experience that would be appropriate to like these combination of features. If it would do that stably as well, that would be really compelling that you found, like that it was really reproducing human experiences.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Sounds promising.
Just sort of briefly follow it up, right? So one of the papers that you cited has an co-author, Jacobi. Yeah, he has been doing this kind of, circular experiment where you ask people to report what they saw and then feed that response to another subject to get a response and so on. Then you get sometimes it's conversion. Like, reproduce the rhythm like tan, ta, tan, tan, tan. And then you hear, and then you try to reproduce, and then you try to hear that, and then reproduce. And then that converts into some kind of, kernel of the sort of a sound or rhythm. And something like that could be also done here, right? Like, you generate the sort of typical 2-3 sentence of this, and then somebody else either analyze or report about that, and then to generate another thing. And then if it converges into some kind of, small sentence, I don't know, that may be a little bit of what Ariel said. And also another one would be to ask other people to rate or choose which one is likely to be generated by computer or human or something like that, adversarial kind of.
Yeah, I really like the circular generation idea. That's yeah. Okay. Should I move on for now?
Yeah, move on.
Okay. Where was I? Okay, so each item now is a topic probability vector. I then take the cosine similarity of those to get the similarity measures, and then build the network from that. So there are, as you may or may not know, there are many different ways of inferring a psychological space, it seems, and that can be set theoretical, like Tversky mentioned, or metric or metric space, or it can be a graphical network, and we just chose to do a graphical network because we thought that it would better allow us to look at actually visualize the multidimensional data without the 2-3-dimensional constraint. And also it would allow us to detect communities or clusters, and allow us to look at how, like, the reasons for the relationship or connections between entities. And it has, this kind of methodology has been already used to represent mental disorders as a network of symptoms or personality traits as emergent of like thoughts and feelings or emotions as well. So we thought it had some theoretical grounding as well. So you can also go to this link to look at the interactive graph. It might be better visualization to go there. Yeah, so doing this, we identified communities that clustered together items that are more similar to each other than others. Yeah, so if we just zoom in a little bit on this side, we get communities of items about positive emotions or peacefulness, and communities of items related to experience of unity or allocentric thoughts about other people, or there are communities of items about transcendental experience of bodily detachment, etc., etc. I didn't get to interpret everything yet. I just interpreted the top 15 or so because the hyperparameters and the changing hyperparameters will also change these as well. So I just kind of left it to do it later. But if we just look at one example, this is the community of positive emotion items. What I want to stress as being significant here is that we are getting communities of items that are not necessarily sententially similar, like semantically at the very superficial level similar, but experientially similar. So one item would come from this questionnaire. My experience had a quality of blissfulness, and then another item would come from another questionnaire, very different dimension that they classified, but it would be like, I would be happy all the time if I felt as I feel now. And there are other items that mostly make sense. There definitely is noise, but mostly it seems to be clustering items that are phenomenologically similar. And we can begin to look at what is driving that similarity as well. So yeah, what is the largest contributing topic that is driving this similarity? It's serene tranquility, contentment, harmoniousness, or inner calmness. Like those are the common features. Yeah, and I've also just started to look at a hypergraph or hypergraph, like more complex network representation of the same data. A hypergraph would be connecting any number of different nodes instead of just two in a regular graph, but this allows us to look at what features are being what features are creating the edges between the items, or how are they related. But I didn't really get to this yet, so I don't have a lot to share. But it is a potential future step. Right. So yeah, so I also looked at whether oh, sorry, Chun.
Sorry, for the result section. So far you mentioned like two topological methods, I will say. The first one is based on the embedding from features, and the second one is from say vectors of themes, right? So
Yes.
I wonder what's the difference between these two kind of similar methodologies. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so. The main difference, I think, is that topic modeling is doing kind of another dimension reduction on the feature sets. So back when I did, when I got the feature embeddings, there were like 500, anything from 500 to 900 features. But even after detecting synonyms and filtering, there were still too many, and a lot of them could still be very similar. It could be like content, for the lack of a better example, content and comfortable, let's say, mean very similar things. And they occur in much of the same kinds of documents, but the synonym detection probably didn't detect them as being synonyms. Right, but they still occur in the same documents. So when they're still left as being different dimensions or different features, that information is kind of dispersed. And so the matrix is large and it could be pretty sparse, like a lot of zeros. I think that might be what's happening.
Okay, and your results get more clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They become much more interpretable. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So communities of items with both semantically and thematically or experientially similar items were discovered. So we want to say that meaningful relationships based on the phenomenological features or qualities of experience beyond just the meaning of the sentences are being revealed. And I think this is promising because this sort of interpretable communities couldn't be identified when I was just getting the embeddings from GPT of the items themselves and clustering them, or when I was when I also tried doing topic modeling on the items themselves, but that mostly seemed to group items based on the sentence itself, or like the words that are being used in the sentence. And this aligns with previous literature that has shown that word co-occurrence in sentences don't necessarily reflect mental representation. So if you think about like yellow banana in a sentence rarely occurs together, although yellow is a representation of banana, but because our language presumably serves a pragmatic purpose of communicating with other people, it doesn't necessarily reflect what you are thinking of. Like, so I think it aligns with that literature. Of course, there are many limitations to this project at its current state. The resulting structure and communities are very highly dependent on the data set that is used. So if there are experiences that are not included in the set of questionnaires, it's probably not getting represented at all in the communities. So we might want to find a different data set, a more comprehensive one with perhaps phenomenological interviews, or adapt the ideas that came out today of generating them to get a more exhaustive data set. And there is an inherent limitation of features as well, in that GPT's feature generation is noisy, and so that is rendering some community incomprehensible, or it's including items that don't really, at face value at least, don't really make sense to be in that community or still in there. And features that are either difficult to verbalize or are not salient might not be being generated either by GPT or humans. And it also varies widely in terms of complexity, in that, for example, color features you might think are more rudimentary as opposed to features about like slower time perception, which might be pointing to a more complex series of events. But those are all being used at the same level of complexity. Yeah, so I would suggest that the methods and results presented here could be considered a reasonable average of human responses potentially, and a proof of concept for a future human experiment with a similar methodology, which I was hoping to brainstorm together. And yeah, there are a bunch of potential applications and future steps, but perhaps this could be a starting point for building a space of qualia in the broader sense. And we could test for structural isomorphism across individual runs, or across conscious states and across participants. And because we have used a set of questionnaires, we think that it could also be used to consolidate across them, given that there are many overlapping dimensions across these questionnaires. We could potentially derive a concise but comprehensive measure that can be used to quantify conscious experience. And hopefully we can mathematically more rigorously formalize the relationships between the items and test whether a similar structure exists in behavioral and neural data. That is my big dream. If you have any ideas, I would love to know and collaborate potentially. But that is all I have to say. I'm sure I went way over 25 minutes. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.